everyone, I'm Whitney and I post a new tutorial every week to help sewers of all skill levels learn new projects and techniques. This week I'm actually sharing two new tutorials because I'm going step by step through how to make a Jedi costume. I've mentioned several times before here on my channel that my husband and I are in a Star Wars group called Jedi OKC, and we dress up in costumes and we go to all different kinds of events, especially charity events, which is super fun and rewarding. And the quickest way to get involved in a group like this, because there are other groups in other states and different areas, the quickest way to get involved is to have a basic Jedi costume. In my last video, I showed how to make the tunic and dicky using Simplicity 5840, and you can find that video in the description box. Today I'm showing the process of making the tabards and the obi to your custom measurements, and also how to include some hidden snaps so you can keep all of your pieces in place perfectly, but no one else will even know they are there. So the first thing we'll need to do is take some measurements, and I'm going to have lots of information on how to do this over on my website, whitneysews.com. The direct link will be in the description box. Because your tabards and obi, the measurements really depend on your overall size and the look that you want. So my husband is 6'3" and his tabards are 7.5 inches wide, 78 inches long, and his obi is 6.5 inches wide. Whereas I am 5'7" and I chose to have my tabards only 5 inches wide. They are about 62 inches long, and then my obi is 4.5 inches wide. So there is definitely quite a bit of difference between our sizes, but we are also 8 inches different in height. So like I said, I'll have lots of tips and information on coming up with those measurements for yourself over on my website. You want to pre-wash your fabric and fold it the opposite direction from how it comes off the bolt. I divided the length my tabards needed to be cut to in half and folded the fabric over a little more than that amount, making sure the selvages are lined up as straight as possible. I don't like using the selvage edge in my costume, so I've already marked about 3/4 inch away from the edge all the way up. Then I used 2 rollers to measure and mark the width of one tabard piece, using that first marking as a guideline. This is the full width of the outer and lining of the tabard plus the seam allowance. It's very important that you're using 2 rollers and measuring several points along the line to make sure you're getting nice straight lines so your tabards turn out looking very nice. At this point, I made Jeremiah come over and hold a tape measure at the fold of the fabric so I could measure exactly half the length my tabard piece needed to be and mark that with the ruler. This way, when the piece is cut out and unfolded, it is then the full length. I went ahead and marked the length for both tabards at once so I didn't have to make Jeremiah get down on the floor again. I very carefully slid my largest cutting mat underneath the fabric and used my rotary cutter, ruler, and safety glove to carefully cut along my marked lines. I did have to reposition the ruler to reach the end, but it went so well and I got nice clean cuts. You can definitely cut them with scissors if that is what you have available, and that's actually how I've cut out all my previous tabard sets. Then I laid the rollers back out and started marking for the second tabard. The reason I didn't mark both in the first place was in case my fabric shifted and I needed to straighten up the edge, which would have changed the measurements. Cut along the marked line again, and the second tabard is cut out. Now onto the obi. I refolded the fabric since the obi is shorter and I wanted to minimize the fabric waste. Then I straightened out the fabric edge and started the same process, just using the obi measurements this time. Cut along the marked lines and you have all of your fabric cut out, but there is still one more very important thing that is needed. It is fusible fleece. This is what I use to keep the obis looking nice and crisp and not ending up slouchy and wrinkled after wearing a few times. I personally like a nice crisp looking obi. Grab the fusible fleece and place it with the textured side against the back side of the obi, so that's about 1/4 inch away from each fabric edge. Use an iron to fuse it in place using the directions on the fusible fleece packaging. Fold the obi in half so it's right sides together. Match up the edges and add clips. Then sew along both short ends and the long side, but leave a gap for turning that is close to one short side. The gap placement is really important for adding those snaps later. Trim the corners to reduce bulk. Reach in through the opening and turn the piece right sides out. Smooth out the seams and poke out the corners so they look nice and sharp. Now I did forget to put an extra piece of fusible fleece on the opposite side of the big piece, so I'm sliding that in here and fusing it in place. The side of the obi that is fully interfaced with the fusible fleece is going to be the outside, and the other side, which is just the fabric, is the inside, and that's why I'm slipping that extra little piece of fusible fleece there, because our snaps are going to go on the lining side, and I just want an extra little layer there so that the snaps won't just rip out through the fabric layer only. Now it's time to add the first side of the snaps along the short side. I measured and marked 4 evenly spaced dots about a ½ inch from the edge of the fabric. Get one snap cap and poke it through the fusible fleece and fabric. You may need to use an awl, but if so, be careful to only go through one layer of fusible fleece and fabric and not through the entire obi. Then add the other half of the snap. Add either 4 male snaps or 4 female snaps on this side, because you'll be adding the opposite ones at the other end later. Put the bottom side of the snap pliers into the opening so the bottom of the snap fits into the pliers, and squeeze them closed to set the snap. Repeat until you set as many snaps as you want. I have 2 on my obi because it's more narrow, but I used 4 on Jeremiah's. Oh, and it's a good idea to set a couple of practice snaps on some scrap fabric before starting in on this project. As you can see, the 4 snaps are inserted, but they're only visible from the back side of the fabric. Time to top stitch all the way around, being careful when you're sewing past those snaps. So here's how it's looking now. We're going to set that aside until later to do a fitting before inserting the other snaps. On to the tabards. I have them folded in half so I can easily mark the halfway point with a pin on each. Grab a ruler and marking tool and put a mark 3 inches down from the halfway point and about 2.5 inches in. Do this on both pieces so they are mirror images of each other. Grab a scrap of fusible fleece and poke a hole with an awl and insert the snap cap post. Then poke it through the fabric at the spot you already marked. Add the other half of the snap and use the pliers to set. By the way, I have a separate video on my YouTube channel where I show much more footage and in much more detail how to use snaps, and I'll have that video linked in the description box if you need more help with the snaps. Repeat the same steps on the other tabard. Later we'll be adding additional snaps onto the tunic that the tabards will snap onto so they don't slip off the shoulders while being worn. Lay one tabard piece so it's right sides up, then fold it over in half so the right sides are all on the inside. Sew around the 3 open sides, leaving a gap in the long side open for turning. Here's how it looks sewn with the opening. You want to backstitch at the beginning and ending of each seam you're sewing so they are nice and secure. Trim down the corners to reduce bulk. Reach in through the opening and turn the entire thing right sides out. Smooth out the seams and poke the corners out. Repeat all these steps for the second tabard. Here's how they look all turned out to the right sides. You can press them ahead of time or sort of roll the seams out with your fingers as you sew a top stitch all the way around. That's what I do, just adjusting the edges as I go along, and it turns out nicely. As you can see here, the tabards are nicely finished and the snap is only visible from the back side, so no one will ever know they're there. At this point, I made Jeremiah come in so I can get everything fitted on him. I put the tabards on him so the snaps are placed just over the shoulders on the inside, and I did my best to make sure they are sitting evenly on the shoulders and they are all level at the bottom. Then I used a piece of sewing chalk and rubbed it on the tabard snap and pressed it onto the tunic so it would leave a mark. That mark is where I will set the other half of the snap, and I did this on both sides. Then onto the obi. I put it around him and made sure the tabards and everything were positioned correctly underneath. Then I did the same thing of marking the snaps with chalk and pressing them on the other side of the obi. I did it one snap at a time, but my spacing actually ended up being a little bit off between the middle two. So it would probably been better to mark all four and then press them all at once. They more than likely won't end up in an exactly straight line because we are three-dimensional shapes, but you do want to try to keep them evenly spaced so that they line up with the other snaps. Time to set all the snaps. On the obi, use an awl to poke the holes all the way through at the markings. Insert the snap and set with the pliers. These snaps are visible from both sides, but they will be up against your body and not visible to anyone else. Here's how it looks with all the snaps and everything snapped together. All that's left now are the snaps on the tunic. I grabbed another scrap of fusible fleece and put it on the inside of the tunic and poked the stem of the snap cap through that and the tunic right at the marking. Put the other half of the snap on, then work the pliers onto the tunic. This can be a little bit of a struggle because you have to get the band and shoulder area all scrunched up into the neck of the pliers. Once everything is in there, make sure the snap pieces are still lined up and squeeze the pliers closed to set the snap. Now it's time to put it all together. Jeremiah put on a pair of tall boots and basic khaki pants. The dicky goes on first over the head, and the strings come around to the back where they are tied. Then the tunic goes on and is crossed over. The obi will hold it closed later. Then I came over to help Jeremiah get the rest on. I can put my entire costume on by myself, but since it was his first time putting it all on with the snaps and everything, I did want to help. So I got the tabards snapped on, then I put the obi around and snapped it all up and adjusted the tabards, making sure everything was nicely in place. And it looks so awesome. I am so happy with how it turned out. It is much nicer than his original one that was made using just cheap cotton fabric and didn't have any snaps. And that costume is now way too big for him anyway, since he has lost almost 50 pounds since it was made. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, we do a lot of stuff with a group called Jedi OKC. The biggest thing we do each year is to actually raise $15,000 to provide a brand new coat and a brand new pair of shoes to every child who is in the Children's Mental Hospital at Christmas. We also do some other events with them, such as an ice cream social in the summer and then a big Halloween event. So we are actually hosting a masquerade 5K run on October 12th, 2019 to help raise some of the funds to buy all these coats and shoes. So it's going to be a ton of fun. There is the masquerade 5K. There's also a shorter 1 mile fun run. There is a costume contest. There is a pet costume contest. There's going to be food trucks, face painting, photo ops with your favorite Star Wars characters, all sorts of different fun things. So the 5K is in the Oklahoma City area, but I know a lot of you live outside of the area, so I wanted to let you know there's also a virtual run option, and you can sign up and you will still get the same medal that the people participating locally will get. So this is just a great way to not only get involved with a Star Wars event, but you can also help support a really great cause, because it is just so amazing to be able to be a part of something like this and help all those children get brand new coats and shoes for Christmas, and it just means so much to them. So if you're interested in this at all, make sure to check out the website. I'll have it linked down below. We would love your support in any way, shape, or form. And yeah, that has been a lot to squeeze into one video. I hope you have enjoyed this series and will make a Jedi costume of your own. If not, I hope you at least enjoyed hearing about some of the things that we do in our Star Wars group. And I actually have other Star Wars themed tutorials here on my YouTube channel, and I'll have a playlist of them linked right over here to the side for you to check out. And until next time, happy sewing.